What's up, Flannelverse? What's up, Endgamers? We are back for Monday Night Football of Week 10, the final game of Week 10. Dolphins at Rams. Should be a fun one. We're going to get into it. We're going to go position by position, quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, defenses, kickers. We're not going to be making lineups at the end. If you have questions, ask throughout the show. I know a lot of you don't watch live anyway, but we will be happy to answer some questions throughout the show. I am, of course, here with Adam, ShipMyMoney Scherer of Endgame Syndicate. And Adam, I saw on Twitter today that you made a little announcement. You're making new beginnings for you today.
Yeah, getting back to doing my own DFS shows. People have been asking a lot about NBA and hadn't really been able to just get everything dialed in and ready to be able to do it consistently early in the season, but should be good to go now. So doing the same version, anybody that watched my baseball shows during the regular season, my NFL shows at the start of the season before I just got busy Sunday mornings and stopped doing them, gonna take a look starting at 4:30 Eastern at what I'd be playing in large field DraftKings NBA tournaments if the slate started right then. Obviously, for NBA more than any other sport, it's not going to be perfect because you're going to get a lot of news and it's going to change a lot of stuff. But going to use that format to walk through plays that I like, players I like, different spots, and obviously talk on potential injury things too. So going to be doing that starting today at 4:30 Eastern on the Endgame Syndicate YouTube channel.
That announcement, Stephen pointed out, we can't see Adam. Yeah, I put you onto the screen, so I think you could hear him, right? I'm pretty sure they could all hear you, but I had not put in the right overlay, so it was just showing me as you're talking.
Tell me about that new show you're doing. Let me mute you and take you off the screen real quick.
Yeah, I think they could at least hear you. So that's pretty exciting. When I discovered Awesemo back in the day, Adam was there, and Adam was a big part of the reason that I kind of moved over and started listening to Awesemo shows, because Adam is really, really good at NBA DFS analysis. So awesome to have Adam doing that. And that starts today, Adam?
Yeah, starting that today at 4:30.
Today at 4:30, that will be on the Endgame Syndicate channel. Of course, if you're not already subscribed, highly recommend subscribing to the Endgame Syndicate YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed to the Flannelverse, I would also appreciate trying to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year. If you would like the videos, comment, all of that, very helpful for the YouTube algorithms. All right, let's get into it. Start with quarterbacks. We've got Matthew Stafford and Tua Tagovailoa. Similar in some ways. Neither of them runs at all. They have really strong receiving options. In the flex, we have Stafford coming in at 46.5% ownership, Tua coming in at 41% ownership. At captain, we have Stafford coming in at 9% ownership, Tua coming in at 7% ownership. Adam, how much are you getting to started with the captain? How much are you getting to quarterback in the captain spot?
Not much, at least in the set of lineups that I made right before the show. I was talking to you, kind of tinkering with my Showdown lineup process. I have been all year. I haven't really been happy with it, but looking at what I'd be getting to if the slate started right now, not getting to too much of either of them at captain. Also looking at their optimal percentages at captain versus ownership. I don't think either one looks that great. SaberSim ownership. I use SaberSim ownership for the show, but they have Tua at 8% projected captain ownership, Stafford at 7%. I have their optimal rates like 4 to 5% for Tua, about 4% for Stafford. So I think they're both pretty low probability optimal captains. I think that the ownership's a little bit higher than it should be. So for once on this show, I'm not just slamming quarterbacks at captain, which feels good.
Yeah, I think that feels about right on this slate. I don't know. It sort of feels like I'll be building for, and I haven't actually filled out the expert survey yet on my approach. Like, what's the game plan? I sort of think this could be a game where there's a lot of PPR scams, like just a lot of players getting a ton of receptions, maybe not a lot of touchdowns, which is not great for the quarterbacks when that happens. So I think I'm with you that the ownership at captain looks a little bit high for me. At least Stafford, Tua at 7% feels about right. I think I don't hate that number, at least. I don't know. Yeah, both playable, but look a little bit over-owned there. And then how much do you say you're getting in the flex? Are you getting to close to 50%?
I'm getting a lot in the flex, which I don't love, but I think that it's fine. I do think that they're both going under-owned in flex, so it makes sense for me that they're showing up as my two highest owned guys in the flex. Stafford projected for about 55% ownership, Tua for 43%. I have Tua optimal in the flex like 55% of the time, Stafford like 57%. So in the lineups I'd be playing right now, I'm 60 to 70% on both of them in the flex, which I don't think is good for limiting dupes. Like, obviously, people are just playing quarterbacks because they project well. But like you and I were talking about before the show, and we've talked about on the show, I think we're kind of in like a weird showdown period right now where if you're really good at predicting dupes, you obviously should be using that information and letting it drive your decisions. But I think that if you're like average at it or just doing it in the same way that we've done it for years, where it's like, oh, I leave salary on the table and I play low owned guys, you might actually kind of be doing yourself a disservice because everybody or a large percentage of the field is doing the same thing now. So what's basically happening is you are choosing to play lower projected, highly duped lineups instead of highly projected, highly duped lineups in a lot of cases. And so, like I've said before, I'm not somebody that is particularly good at predicting dupes. I'm not good at the combinatorial aspect of it. I don't think most people are. It's really hard to do. So I don't expect, like, looking at these exposures I have, that I'm going to be doing a great job at limiting dupes. But I do think that there's still a pretty decent chance it's giving me the best lineups that I can to make money. And so, getting to both of those quarterbacks a lot.
Yeah, it's I used to, be pretty good at limiting dupes, whether my lineups are good. I thought they were. I don't know. You could question it. But used to be really good at it. And like you say, like, I think the field has really sharpened up. Now just leaving salary on the table isn't enough. I used to, like, in my best years in DFS, I would leave 1,800 on the table. It was like my salary max I would set as leaving 1,800 or at least like 1,600 on the table. Now I'm moving more and more to, like, yeah, I'll just leave 600, 800, 1,000, like, depending on the slate, like what's available as far as value goes. Like, I don't leave nearly as much salary on the table because it doesn't seem as worthwhile in terms of avoiding dupes, because a lot of people are leaving a lot of salary on the table. So, like, I'm like, oh, I'll allow myself to get to more of the higher projected lineups that have a better chance of hitting. Yeah, the equation is changing, like, in real time, and we have to adjust. So it can't be like, can't just shoot for all of the non-dupe lineups anymore, because those are probably just bad lineups.
Yeah, and I think it's a function of, one, the field just getting better and there being tools that aren't very good at predicting which lineups are duped the most, but people are using them, and so it's driving them to basically the best lineups that are not predicted to be duped a lot, and then they're duped a ton too. But then also, we've talked about it too, the pricing changes on DraftKings. Like, if the easier it is to get whoever the best plays on the slate are into your lineups along with other functional players, the more you're sacrificing in projection by going to, the borderline, the backup tight ends and guys like that. And then people are still doing it and duping. Like, it's creating a situation where, again, I kind of am just leaning towards, and part of this is just probably me being a little bit biased because I was doing it early in the year and making money. And then I started caring more about dupes and started just, like, lighting money on fire and not really having lineups that were duped all that much less. But I think it's kind of just shifting to where, like, playing good lineups is going to probably make you more money than caring about dupes if you're not good at the dupe part, which is the big caveat.
If you are shady advice, then, like, yeah, it makes sense to care about dupes. If you're somebody who really is good at making lineups that project well, have a good shot at winning, and avoid dupes, you should do that. But, like, the way that I do it, where it's just kind of like mashing, like, all right, I'm just going to leave salary on the table. Like, the easy things don't really work as well anymore. So now it's like, yeah, we've kind of flipped back to, maybe we just play the best lineups and hope that they aren't duped as much as you expect. Because you see that sometimes where it's like, there's nobody low owned, it all makes sense, and still there are only 5 dupes. And I don't know how it happens, but, like, just kind of hope for that luck, I guess, with a good lineup.
And to your point too, with shadies, like I mentioned it before, I obviously don't know exactly how he's doing it, but, like, he'll play, if you go back and look, he'll have a lot of lineups that are duped like 4 or 5 times and they leave like $500 on the table. So it's not like he's taking the approach, like, he's just better at the let me leave salary on the table approach that everybody's done for years. Like, he's obviously, and I have some ideas of what it probably is, but he's obviously doing things that are not salary related in choosing his lineup. So it's definitely a different game as far as predicting dupes now than it used to be.
Yeah, for sure. And I still think, like, it's worth it if you can factor it in a way that, like, I don't know, you can try to limit dupes, but also, like I said, I've moved more towards, like, yep, just going to leave 800 on the table. And if I'm duped a million ways, then I'll just accept that I'm not winning as much. I still look like it is important as far as EV. So, like, the same things we've always said are still true, but it's gotten so much harder that maybe it makes more sense to, sometimes relax those rules a little bit. As far as stacking goes with these quarterbacks, I think they're both the same to me, where I'm always stacking them. And if I have them in the captain spot, I'd like to have multiple stacking partners in the flex. That obviously includes Devin Achane. I don't know. You could include, I think, the running backs in that equation of how much you're stacking. What do you think, Adam? How much do you stack in your quarterbacks, do you think?
Yeah, I would expect to be stacking them a lot, whether it's they're at flex or at captain. Neither guy is running a lot. They do both have, very quality pass catchers as well. So it's not like you're in one of those games where you have a quarterback that doesn't run and he doesn't have anybody to throw to. There's obviously receivers you'd like to pair with them. So I would expect to be stacking them quite a bit.
Yep. What's up, Josh? Yeah, you went over the Sunday morning show. Just didn't have. It's so hard to do content on Sunday mornings. I do it anyway, but yeah, it's definitely eats into your time to make lineups and stuff.
Like I was trying to do that show, and then I was also trying to have stuff prepped and ready to go for my dub club / endgame subs, and it was just like I have way too much money in play to be like scrambling around lock every NFL Sunday. So, and that was the easiest thing to cut out.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, let's move on to running backs. And I think it's going to start with Kyren Williams as the top projected. Yes, it is. Let's see. So let's start with the Ram side. It's kind of the easier side. I think Kyren's usage has just been awesome this year. He's going to get some ownership. Let's see, start with captain for Kyren, getting 15% projected ownership at captain. In the flex, coming in at sub 40% projected ownership. So about 54% ownership overall for Kyren. Adam, how much are you getting to?
Yeah, so having projected for like 26%. I have the optimal captain percentage for him at 23%. So not going that overowned, but I'm only getting to about 14% right now. That is certainly subject to change by lock. Obviously we have injury news on this slate. And like I said, I'm kind of just screwing around with different ways that I could play this slate. So right now I'm not getting as much as the field, but he is still my third highest owned captain. I would expect him to be one of my highest owned captains here. I don't think that, there's any real reason to be taking like a massive stand against him. The ownership, while it is high, isn't crazy high relative to his chance of being optimal. He's clearly the number one running back here, no matter how many times Sean McVay says that he wants to start dialing it back and limiting his workload a little bit. It doesn't happen. So yeah, it looks really good. Like the only negative for Kyren is that he's not super involved in the passing game. Does, get there occasionally, but he's definitely not your like typical pass catching running back. But, he's on the field for 3 downs. Typically he's getting tons of work around the goal line. So just looks really good.
Did you lose me for a second there? You started sputtering on my screen, but then it started refreshing both of us. So I think I'm having internet issues.
You look super like blurry on my screen, but I don't know if that's your end or mine.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like I think it's on my end. I think I maybe am having, connection is unstable, it says. So I don't know what's going on with my internet. So hopefully I don't, because I know Adam's not going to stick around long if I get if I knocked out of here.
I'll be around as long as it takes.
And you have no way to end the stream, I don't think.
Yeah, so I don't think I can either. So I might just
exactly.
Oh, yeah, there's the Leaf Studio button. I'm ready to go.
Okay, good. Hopefully that doesn't come to that. What was I going to say? So you said you have Kyren at like 27% captain ownership?
Yeah, that's what Saberson had.
Okay, because that's a massive difference.
What RG didn't have ownership this morning when I looked, so I don't know what they have.
Yeah, it just came up like 20 minutes before the show. They have a 15% projected captain ownership, which obviously 15% looks really good. Yeah, he would look awesome at 15%.
As usual, the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. I had his optimal rate at like 23. Sabersim has 26. RG has 15. It's probably like 22.
Yeah. Oh, see, Jay said, I guess I don't know which stacking rules you're referring to. The quarterback stacking stuff has remained pretty that is one of the few edges for sure that I think we still have. It's like non-rushing quarterbacks, you multiple stack them if you have them in the captain spot. Generally, you always stack them. Like I think those the quarterback stacking rules, you might be referring to like other positions that people try to force in other weird stacking rules.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if he was referring to like actual effectiveness or limiting dupes, because like you used to that's another thing. Like in addition to leaving salary, you could just kind of like do something weird, like play Derrick Henry and Justice Hill together, and you're different. And then now it's like, nope, 25 other people still did the same thing. Yeah, it's gotten a lot tougher in terms of dupe limitations for sure.
What about Kyren looks awesome. Obviously, if he comes in 15%, you probably want more than that. If he comes in 27%, a little bit less. He's going to look like a very strong captain play. As you said on the show previously, don't worry about dupes as much with running back a captain because you're not forced into the same types of builds like you are with quarterback. So like 54, 55% total ownership sounds like are you getting more than that overall?
Right around there. 40% flex, 14 captain, so like 54% total.
Okay.
So yeah, pretty much in line with the field there.
And then Blake Corum, like you said, the coaches talk about like, oh, we're going to do 2 series for Kyren, 1 for Corum, whatever. And then the end result for Corum on the season is 21 carries in 6 games, 2 targets on 2.6% route participation. They clearly are not treating him like Kyren. Like everybody this summer was like, oh, it's gonna be a split backfield. They're basically the same running back. They drafted a second Kyren, and it's just been the Kyren show. So it's almost entirely contingent upside, but that contingent upside is massive for Blake Corum. Like if you get he's probably not as good as Kyren Williams, so I don't want to make it sound like he is the exact clone of Kyren Williams that we all kind of thought he was coming into the year. But he's probably good enough, and he's probably going to get a huge workload if Kyren ends up getting hurt or something in this game. So I don't know. How do you break it down with Corum? He's coming in pretty low owned, 7.5% ownership here on Roto Grinders. How do you feel about that ownership? What are you doing with Corum?
Yeah, it doesn't look like I'm getting too much. Like I'm below the field right now at 1,200. I mean, you laid out the path to him being good. It takes one Kyren Williams injury, and you have a $1,200 running back that is probably actually good and can probably produce similarly to Kyren in this offense. So, that is the path. I think the ownership is around where it should be from an optimal standpoint. So I'm not getting too much of him, but I certainly wouldn't talk people off of it. Just, he is what he has been all season long.
Yeah.
And also it just came up in chat, but like the exact point that we're making, the Tyron Wallace game, you still chopped like 7 or 8 ways.
That was that was the most frustrating thing. I felt like everything in that game went according to plan. Like I was like, I feel like I should be crushing. Anybody who watched the show should be crushing. I was at one point in like the third quarter before he had the long touchdown. I was trailing the winning lineup by like one fantasy point in one of the contests I was in, and I had Charlie Kolar, and they had Tylen Wallace. So, okay, so he had his one fluke catch for the game.
I had the same lineup,
and I'm clearly going to pass that. Yeah, that doesn't shock me. And then Tylen Wallace went on for 115 yards and just insane. And I think he only ran 5 routes in the game. I think Levitan tweeted that out. Like it was just he had 2 targets on the season up to that point. Man, it just that the play didn't make much sense to me. It was like in a 150 set, maybe you get to a couple, but like even then, I don't know. It's still kind of a tough play. And
that's the whole thing. Like at least 3 years ago, if you get that random out of nowhere Tylen Wallace game, you're winning 500K or whatever it was. Now it's just like I'd be so pissed off if I played Tylen Wallace lineups that happens, and then I open the DK app and I'm splitting money with like 7 other people.
Or like I'm sure there were lineups that had him and lost. Like,
right.
I'm sure that wasn't the only lineup that had Tylen Wallace. And it's like, how the hell do you lose with Tylen Wallace? Yeah, that's kind of insane. Kind of insane that he got there. But yeah, good for them. Actually, Sacrilegious won one of the tournaments I was in with Tylen Wallace, and it was I think he uses SaberSim. So SaberSim was given to people, but probably also given him to people under the assumption like you're going to be the only one who has him in this tournament. Yeah, so that is super frustrating for those people. And for the rest of us who lost because Tylen Wallace went off.
Yeah, like I would get over it when I'm making like 85K or whatever they got paid. But like that's the lineup that is supposed to solo win.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so Blake Corum, 7.5% feels pretty good to me, just given the massive contingent upside, even if it is probably all entirely contingent upside. Like you can factor in a little bit like maybe one of these days, maybe they really do mean it and eventually it'll happen that he actually has standalone value. It's probably not going to happen. Like you said, like they've been saying it, they haven't been doing it. So probably not happening, but we know he has at the very least massive contingent upside. So I think in large field GPPs, he makes some sense, but 7.5% doesn't feel too far off from where I think it should be. The Miami side, a little bit less clear. You've got Devin Achane, Raheem Mostert, and Jaylen right there. I mean, I shouldn't say it's less clear. Devin Achane, seemingly coming on, having his best role yet in that most recent game. Yeah. 8 targets in that game, 7 in the game prior to that. Am I sorting this right? Hang on one second. I am. I thought he had, for some reason, I thought he had 20 some carries in that last game. So maybe I misread that, or maybe I'm thinking of somebody else. 12 carries last game, 10 the game before, 8 targets last game, 7 the game before, 80% route participation in that most recent game for Devin Achane. Pretty strong role there. He obviously projects very well, projecting only behind Kyren Williams among running backs. He's 9,400. With Achane in the captain spot, we're getting 17% ownership. In the flex, Achane coming in at 47% ownership. So you're getting 64% total ownership going to Devin Achane. How much are you getting, and where are you getting him?
Yeah, I'm getting an absurd amount of him right now, and this is certainly something that could change between now and lock. But he's my highest owned captain in like 50% of my lineups, which feels really, really aggressive. But I do have him going from an optimal standpoint a little bit over owned at captain, like by a similar margin to Kyren Williams, Stafford, to most of the other legitimate captain options that you would want to get to. But I have him going really over owned at flex, which is also the case for Kyren Williams and Cooper Kupp in particular. But I think that is kind of driving him up for me at captain. And then I have like 32% at flex. So I'm still getting him at flex, but a lot lower than the field. And then I'm pretty much just jamming him at captain, which I am fine with. Again, I wouldn't be upset if that comes down a little bit and I'm just a little bit more diverse in my lineups. I never feel great about just slamming in like one individual captain. But if I am going to do it, doing it with somebody like Achane is fine. He's just running so many routes for this team. He's so involved in the passing game. Full point PPR obviously is a huge benefit for him. He's still getting carries. You know, obviously you do have Mostert vulturing him around the goal line plenty of the time, but I do like getting to him a lot. You're getting a salary discount also compared to Kyren, and then you are getting, you know, somebody that's more involved in the passing game than Kyren also, which is nice.
Yeah, looks really good. Nice salary savings. Tough to argue with Devin Achane. Looks great. Talk about this. I have to touch on this because Josh, talking about Tylan Wallace, same with Mechie last night. Kind of, it is a massively different situation. Mechie was like a legitimately good play last night. Like Tylan Wallace had 2 targets on the entire year on like very few routes run, and then they added Deontay Johnson, and then somehow that was the game he went off on really limited routes. John Mechie, we knew was going to have a pretty big role last night because both Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins was out. So it was like he's going to be on the field running a lot of routes. Was kind of expecting a lot of targets. So I was really into John Mechie last night, whereas Tylan Wallace, like I saw the name and was like, yep, not playing any Tylan Wallace. It just like went right past it because it was like, why would you ever play that guy? Whereas John Mechie last night was like legitimately very strong play.
Yeah, I mean, the week, like last week, Mechie ran routes 63% of the time. He had like 7% target share. That 7% target share, I don't know, but I would guess would be like the highest of Tylan Wallace's career.
Yeah, probably. You didn't. Oh, he says you didn't see my other message, Neil. Okay, so maybe he was talking about something different. Apologies. I do want to touch on this. So Josh says tips for hand building. Do you start with a core of 3 or 4 players? So I write up an article for each showdown slate, and basically there's always kind of a list of players that separate from the pack just in terms of projection and just the general, like, for the sake of ease. My suggestion is to always have 3 of these players, and there's random slates occasionally where it's like, okay, maybe it's a little bit hairier here, maybe you don't need to go there. But like so for today, I would say you want to have at least 3 of these players in every lineup. So if you're hand building, have at least 3 of Kyren Williams, Tyreek Hill, Devin Achane, Tua Tagovailoa, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and Matthew Stafford. And if you look at any projection system and sort by fantasy points, you can see the pretty clear break here. You have these 7 players projecting for 17 plus fantasy points, and then a huge breakdown to Janu projecting for 10 fantasy points. So like, just start with, you want to have 3 of the highest projected players, and then build around those plays. Three, sometimes it can be 4, like depending on how the pricing works out. But that's essentially all I'm saying is you want a lineup that projects pretty well. Like you don't want to completely ignore projections generally. Again, there'll be random slates here or there where it's just like, the top projected plays aren't actually that much more likely to hit than the plays behind them, and they're all kind of a big plateau. But like in this slate, there's a pretty clear break between the high projections and the lower projections. Any other tips for hand building, Adam?
In general, I mean, obviously I don't do it, but in general, when I did do it years ago, I was always like a bottom up guy where I'm looking for the best value pieces and plugging them in and then seeing what else I can do around it. Because, obviously if you just plug in the top projected guys, you run out of salary pretty quickly. So I've always been, okay, well, these guys are the best point per dollar pieces. I'm going to start there and then I'm going to see what else I can get to and kind of adjust from there. And also, I guess one other thing I used to do that I had success with that in theory should still work is I would actually try, and I mean, now obviously you can just do it with an optimizer, but I would basically, using that bottom up approach, try and put together what I thought was like the highest projected lineup or the best lineup you could play, and then find the weakest piece of it that I expected to be popular, and then pivot off of that to somebody that I thought had a similar ceiling, even if it was a lower projection.
Yep, that makes sense. And then of course you always want to pay attention to correlation. The one that I think is the most important, really the only correlation that I'm like, this is a correlation that you need, is those quarterback correlations, because it's like most of the time it's like, well, it's almost like, yes, one of these two quarterbacks could get there without a stacking partner. Tua or Stafford randomly runs in 1 yard touchdown, whatever, quarterback sneak into the end zone, and then spreads the ball around quite a bit. It can happen, but like it happens so infrequently that I also think that's the one correlation that I really do think, the one positive correlation that I do force is like, if I have one of these non-running quarterbacks in the captain, I want to have them stacked multiple times. If I have them in the flex, I want them always stacked. That's the only correlation I'm like, you need to have this. Whereas like the other sort of negative correlations, like you talked about, like playing two running backs on the same team, that's, in my opinion, viable and something I like to do. Quarterback against opposing defense, those other types of slight negative correlations, I don't try to avoid those. I actually lean into those to try to help with avoiding dupes. But that would be my one other piece of advice. Okay. Other running backs on Miami. Raheem Mostert has not been all that great this year. And let's take a look at his game log also, as Achane has taken on more of a role. Mostert just 22% snap share last week. He had 10 carries, 2 targets on 6.7% route participation. Last year was more of a split backfield. This year, clear that Achane has just taken over that top role as a top running back. Mostert coming in the flex at 17% ownership at 7,400. So he's a pay up. And at captain, we have Mostert coming in at 2.5% ownership. I don't know. This is a guy who put 45 fantasy points or something crazy last year in a game. Just hasn't been looking this year. Do you have any interest in, or how much are you playing Raheem Mostert?
I'm not getting to much, I think, because of the price tag, and it's just the kind of lack of valuable touches. Like if you look at last week and even the week before, he's basically splitting carries with Achane. 39% market share on the ground for Achane last week, 32 for Mostert, 40% Achane, 36% Mostert the week before that, 38-28 the week before that. But just getting, random handoffs isn't super valuable. And they do use Mostert around the goal line a bit, but it's not like he's, Jerome Bettis just getting every goal line carry. And at 7,400, just getting into the end zone isn't getting it done for you anyway. You probably need him to get in multiple times. So I think he's okay in large field stuff. If you're just going to take a stand of one, if Achane were to get hurt, Mostert's going to look really good. Although Jaylen Wright probably just plays a bigger role also. Or two, maybe you do just get the Mostert falls into the end zone 4 times game at pretty low ownership. I think it's a spot where you're definitely overpaying. So like you could make the case that you're overpaying to be contrarian, but that's not really the route that I'm going, which in part could be because I have 50% Achane at captain. And if we get the Raheem Mostert, goes nuts at 7,400 game, then those lineups are dead anyway. Yeah.
I'm looking up fastest speeds reach just to see if he makes it onto that list at all. Because he did. He is this year in 2024. He did reach a top speed of 21.62 miles per hour once. So he does still have the speed. So I guess that would be the one other thing, like for Mostert, is theoretically he could still run for like a 70-yard touchdown just because he does still have that kind of blazing speed. I mean, that's always been, that's part of what we liked about him previously, is like, well, he and like every one of the weapons on the Dolphins. Like they're all speedsters. Like they're all guys who can just break off a 70-yard play. So at least theoretically he has that in his bag. But yeah, he's not getting great usage this year. It's a little bit tough, and he's expensive. So I don't know. I think the ownership seems okay. I think the 2.5% capped ownership. I think I might like that better than the flex ownership to some extent. Just like hope for one of those 70-yard touchdowns, and then he somehow gets to the 100-yard bonus with his few other touches. I don't know. What do you think? Do you like him better at captain or in the flex?
I think I like him better in the flex. I have him showing up optimal in the flex 11% of the time, sub 1 at captain. So I do like him more in the flex. I think that basically if I stop playing so much Achane at captain, I assume I start playing a little bit more Mostert. Not that I think he's a great play regardless, but I basically have none right now. But again, I think that's just because I have so much Achane at captain. Whereas if I start playing more Achane at flex or just have lineups that don't have Achane, Mostert's can make a lot more sense in those lineups.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. Yeah, it's a tricky situation because the usage, again, not really great for Mostert this year. Here, and I'll just pull it up again so we can see the game log here. But it's like, he is still getting like 10 carries per game over the past 3 weeks. He had 19 in week 5. I don't remember what happened there. That might have been I think that's when Tua was out. So maybe they were just running more in general then. The route participation, don't love that he was down single digits in the last game, but typically, you see 25% the 2 games prior. I don't know. Like, I think
Achane got hurt that game too.
Okay. There are running backs, there have been multiple running backs over the past couple of weeks where it's like, yeah, he's the backup running back. He's just too expensive for this role. Isaac Rendo was one that I was like, yeah, I'm not going there. That's way too expensive for his role. And he's getting some ownership. Mostert, I can see it more than I could see it with like Rendo in that game.
But he's I think Rendo might have been more expensive than Mostert is. But either way, it was like you weren't expecting Garendo to split carries. Garendo was like, if Jordan Mason gets hurt, which he did immediately. But, at least with Mostert, like there is a path to him doing well. Like you said, he's probably going to get double-digit carries. If he houses one of them from the 50, then he's going to look really good. If he doesn't, he's probably not.
Yeah. So looks okay. And it's obviously a nice matchup with the Rams. You could, I guess we haven't looked at schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed. None of it looks as good as I thought it would for the Rams. So I'll just go quickly position by position. So quarterback against the Rams. And actually I'll leave this up and then I'll just go back to my article and reference that because I've already written out some of this stuff. So the Rams defense has allowed the 18th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to running back. So actually below average matchup by this metric. I'm not totally buying it. I think that's a pretty bad defense. So I think it's a plus spot for the Dolphins. For quarterbacks, the Rams defense has allowed the 10th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game. For receivers, they've allowed the 12th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game. And then I'll just see for tight ends, they have allowed the 12th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game. And then the Dolphins have allowed to running backs the 12th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game, to quarterbacks the 10th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game, to wide receivers the 8th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game. So it's a tough matchup for receivers against the Dolphins. And then for tight ends, the 9th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game. So I don't know. It's not like a great matchup, but I think it's better than it looks on paper, at least. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I should just listen to the data here, but that is my read, that I think it's actually a pretty good matchup for the Dolphins. Jaylen Wright is 3,000. Feels a little bit tough to get to. Jaylen Wright obviously has multiple paths to having a bit of a better role. 6 carries in the most recent game. So that's not bad. 6 carries and 0 targets on the season. Just 1 target on, early in the year. Not bad route participation, but that's really dropped off with both of the other running backs healthy. How do you feel about, actually, let's take a look at the ownership. Jaylen Wright coming in at, probably only playing him in the flex, 4.5% projected ownership at 3,000. Seems okay.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I'm not getting to him. I have him showing up optimal like 3% of the time. I'd like it a lot more if he were running routes or being utilized at all in the passing game lately. Like you said, he was earlier in the season, so maybe that's something that we see change, but there's nothing really to suggest or indicate that that's likely to happen today. And he's expensive enough where it's really hard, I think, for him to get there just on the ground on limited touches. Again, like maybe he just has an 80-yard touchdown run and he smashes. But like assuming that doesn't happen, it's tough to get there with basically no passing game involvement without like an injury ahead of him. So very low probability play. It's a 1-game slate, low probability plays hit, but it's not something that I'm particularly interested in at that price.
Yeah, like it's not the worst play to me because he has multiple outs to being a little bit more useful, but also kind of tough to get there. And he's 3,000. If he were 200, I think I'd have a lot of interest, but 3,000 just like it's going to take a score to actually be relevant. So
Yep.
a little bit tough to have.
Back to the point we've made 100 times too. Like the most expensive player on this slate is Kyren at 10.8. There's two guys 10K or higher. It's harder for that cheap but not free guy to be optimal off of just one touchdown.
Yep, exactly. Anything else at running back? Alec Ingold, any interest there?
I think I have him in like a lineup.
Projects better than I thought he would. Let's see.
I have him in 2 of 50.
He has
more Alec Ingold than Raheem Mostert right now.
Okay. I mean, he's cheap. Did have 3 targets 2 games ago. He's had a couple games with 3 targets on the season. Not awesome usage there. Presumably has some like potential to get a goal line carry. I don't know. 9 carries on the year, 7 targets on 12.2% route participation in 8 games. Seems fine to mix in, but he is the very definition of like if he scores a touchdown, you want him. If he doesn't, you won't. He's probably not going to score a touchdown, but he will at some point this year. I don't know. So you're getting to a little bit.
Yeah, he's in like 2 of 50 lineups right now, just because he's 400 and fits into those lineups. We haven't gotten the tight end yet, but I have Davis Allen for the same reason. So I would obviously rather be getting to Raheem Mostert than Ingold. I don't want me saying that I have more Ingold than Mostert right now as some like endorsement for Ingold or knock on Mostert. Clearly, you're going to feel better about having Mostert, but the prices are quite a bit different.
Yeah. Wait, I was just got a lot of comments. I was going to Travis Petty first. If Hill is out, maybe make case. That's true. Maybe you look. I mean, everybody will look a little bit different if Tyreek Hill is ultimately out. What is up? Retired guy Travis Petty. Good to see Petty in chat after he just took down $200,000 on FanDuel yesterday on that FanDuel main slate. That's annoying, isn't it? I mean, come on, fucking guy. He retires from NBA DFS and just immediately crushes NFL DFS. Of course, he had been like top 5 earlier in the year too, right?
He had finished. He was like 7th, I think, but it was behind like a 6-team.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So it was kind of due. In some ways, it was like, man, he had really bad luck in that one. So turned it around. Congrats to Travis Petty on the retirement and the Bink.
To the Tyreek Hill point also, if Hill is out, I thought about when we were talking about Mostert. If Hill's out, you could certainly see a more run-heavy game plan in general, which would make Mostert look a little bit better. Also, if Hill is out, keep in mind that it's likely to impact the efficiency of their offense, taking somebody like Tyreek Hill off the field. So it's one of those situations where it's not as simple as just saying, Tyreek Hill out, Jaylen Waddle is a stud. Like obviously the ceiling becomes higher, but you do have the threat of just more running in general and less efficient passing game.
Yep. Very true. Very true. All right. We'll move on and talk about wide receivers. Of course, it's all going to start with Tyreek Hill if he is actually maybe let's start with the Rams side. They might actually project better anyway. Oh, got to refresh this. I assume Hill will project the best, but let's see. Damn it. All right, let's go to Rotogrinders. In terms of no, start at flex. Puka projects the best. I guess let's do the Ram side first. It's a little bit cleaner than the Dolphin side. Puka Nacua projecting for 42% ownership in the flex, projecting for 14.5% ownership in the captain spot. Really hard to gauge the usage because Puka he's played 3 games. He got hurt in the first one. He got suspended in the first half of the third one. And in the middle one, it was like we weren't really expecting him to have a big role. He wasn't a full-time route participant, but he just got a ton of targets in that game. So ultimately, Puka's usage is kind of not like, you can't really tell what his usage should be based on what he has done so far. But so far and I have 2023 pulled up. Oops. I was looking at River Craycraft. I don't think this. No, this is our first with wide receiver, so this has not affected anything yet. Good. Okay, on the season, 17 targets, 41.9% route participation in 3 games for Puka Nacua. Obviously, that's not indicative of the role we should expect, because I think this should be his first time. I would expect this to be the game that he has the highest route participation so far. He looks really good. How much Puka are you getting to?
Yeah, I think he looks really good as well. He's my 3rd highest owned captain right now at like 14%. So pretty close to the field there. And that's pretty much in line. I have him with a 14% chance of being optimal at captain as well. Getting to like 40%. 42% in the flex also. Just I think looks like a good price tag at 9K. I think that all the things you mentioned, they're kind of keeping the price tag in check a little bit. If he'd been fully healthy all season long, he most likely would be more than 9K on this slate. So I think all of that looks good. Hopefully he doesn't get ejected in the first half. Hopefully he doesn't get hurt. But, clearly somebody that is still earning a ton of targets when he is on the field. We've seen him. We don't know exactly what his health status is, but we have still seen him even when he was somewhat limited 2 games ago, just go out there and get a million targets still. So I feel pretty good about him.
Yeah, he obviously looks really good. Should expect heavy usage for Puka tonight. How much are you getting to in captain specifically?
16%.
Okay.
So he's actually my second. It's Achane, Puka, Kyren are my 3 highest owned captains right now.
Okay. And then behind Puka on in terms of projection is Cooper Kupp coming in at 13% ownership at captain. At flex, Cooper Kupp coming in at 39% ownership. So just a little bit over 50% overall. How much interest do you have in Cooper Kupp?
I have 8% at captain, 32% at flex. I think, obviously he looks fine, but he is a little bit more expensive than Puka when, at worst or at best, I don't know which one of those is correct there. They're pretty much the same player.
Yeah.
They're both, going to get a ton of targets. They're clearly the 2 top pass catchers here. They both earn plenty of targets. They're both good receivers. Kupp is a little bit more expensive. He's getting similar ownership, slightly below Puka, but I think that they both look pretty good. I just have more Puka than Kupp right now. To Brandon Katz's point that teams are starting to take Puka away because he only had 4 targets last game. He got ejected in the first half, so that would be why.
Go figure. I saw some confusion about people being in chat and not being in chat. We're streaming to both of our YouTube channels right now, so if we're referencing somebody in chat and you don't see it, it's probably because they're in the other chat. So we're streaming to both the Flaniverse and the Endgame Syndicate. Again, please make sure you are subscribed to both. Okay. So I pulled up the this is kind of a cool newer tool, the weekly target share report, just to look at that. Yeah, I think Cooper Kupp's obviously went up drastically because we had Puka Nacua ejected in the first half of the game. The game prior to that, though, Puka Nacua actually 26.5% target share, Cooper Kupp 23.5%. Both of them, it's a little bit unclear because both of them came into that game like we didn't know how much they'd be able to play, but Cooper Kupp ended up running 79.4% of routes in that game. Puka Nacua and just 61.8% and got more targets despite the lower target share. So I don't know. Both are obviously really strong options. I think they're both still like they're more of a 1A, 1B, like clearly than like Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle. Like this is not a situation where one massively separates and you like every single game it's going to be I like this guy over that guy, like it is with like Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle. But yeah, both have pretty strong roles, both strong plays. What about DeMarcus Robinson or other options on the Rams? Let's take a look at flex ownership. I'll sort by fantasy points here. DeMarcus Robinson projecting for 14 fantasy points, 2 touchdowns in each of the last 2 games for DeMarcus Robinson. But honestly, he's still not getting much ownership. So kind of interesting to me. How much interest do you have in DeMarcus Robinson?
I'm not getting the much. I think, you obviously made the case for the upside is that he's a deep ball threat. He has been all year. We've talked about that before when dealing with Rams injuries in different games, that Robinson kind of like, he has that set role where he's the big play threat. That's not going to come through all that often, but when it does, he can become optimal very quickly, like we saw a couple of weeks ago, or maybe, I think like 2 weeks ago or something. 5,600 is kind of like it's one of those tough prices where for his median projection, he's overpriced, but for his ceiling, it's a pretty favorable price tag. And again, just comes down to, do they hit on a 40-yard touchdown or not? So I think the ownership is reasonable. I have him optimal in the flex 14% of the time, 12% ownership. I think he's perfectly fine. He's not showing up a ton for me right now, but again, that's just early in the day. That is relatively likely to change. He definitely doesn't stand out as somebody that I think is like a bad play. I think he's a perfectly good way to differentiate your lineup because you're getting a relatively low-owned guy who still does have a high ceiling.
Yeah, it's interesting because like obviously in that last game, it was probably in part due to the ejection for Puka Nacua, but there has been some positive coach speak for Demarcus Robinson in recent weeks, and obviously we've seen it. Sean McVay said 2 days ago, Demarcus Robinson has maximized his opportunities. He's getting more and more comfortable. I think he and Matthew Stafford have a really good rapport. He's delivered. Actually, the more interesting quote to me, and let me go find it because I actually thought this was intriguing from Sean McVay. He said, this is on the 30th. He said, okay, Demarcus Robinson has always been a really good player. I think we saw his emergence last year, starting with the Cleveland game. He's had a lot of positive momentum since then. There's a lot of trust between him and Matthew Stafford. And this is, I thought, the interesting where he said he thrives in his position he's comfortable in. And it's no coincidence we see that when Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua come back, which I don't know. It's sort of interesting to hear the coach say that he actually thinks that Demarcus Robinson benefits. I've sort of joked about that being the case of like, oh, clearly he just needed Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua to be there to open up his better role. But Sean McVay like seems to believe that is true, and like it bears out in the stats. So maybe there is some truth to that. Like he actually was hurt by the injuries to Cooper Kupp, and Puka Nacua just wasn't able to be a wide receiver one. Maybe he is like this is just his better role as the wide receiver three. So that's just some food for thought, I guess, with Demarcus Robinson. Okay. So ultimately, I think he looks pretty good, but not like doesn't stand. He's too expensive. Ultimately, like he should be a $3,000-$4,000 player, and he's a $5,600 player. So you kind of need things to go right, but looks okay there.
And it does make sense too for him to be better. Like he's not somebody that, because of the routes that he runs, is likely to pretty much ever be just drawing, 15 targets or anything because guys are out. He's going to be better when defenses are stretched thinner because they have better, other playmakers to worry about on his offense.
Yep. And then Tutu Atwell and Tyler Johnson, I kind of think you can almost ignore them. I don't know. Tyler Johnson I guess he had 26.5% route participation with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua back, but I think they are both more likely to just have really limited roles. If we see Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua in full-time roles, like Cooper Kupp more getting there over the past couple weeks. Last week was pretty close. But I think with Puka Nacua out, probably that benefited Tyler Johnson more so. So maybe this is kind of what we can expect from week 8. And I would think even more of a dip because we can probably expect Puka to play more. So I don't know. I think both feel like they're the classic backup tight end that we always talk about. Like they score a touchdown, maybe you'll want them, but otherwise probably not going to be doing a ton. The ownership should reflect that. Let's see, Tutu Atwell coming in at sub 5% ownership. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, but both coming in at sub 5% ownership. So I guess that would be the case for them. Are you getting too much of Tutu Atwell or Tyler Johnson?
No, I have a couple lineups with Tyler Johnson just because he's 1,600 and maybe something weird happens. But no, I think you're exactly right. Like clearly you're expecting them to take a back seat with Kupp and Puka back. It goes back to Demarcus Robinson having his own clear-cut role. It's not expected or likely that you're getting Tutu Atwell and Tyler Johnson cutting into Demarcus Robinson just because they had big roles with Kupp and Puka out. Those guys are more replacements for what those two guys do. So when they come back, you get Johnson and Atwell taking a back seat while Demarcus Robinson keeps that third wide receiver role. So not expecting either one to be on the field a ton. I do think they'll both be on the field, more than zero routes or anything. Like they'll be on the field enough where something good could happen for them. So again, I have a couple lineups with Tyler Johnson, but I fully expect them to not be very heavily involved.
I just attempted to just put Brandon Katz in timeout because I know how distracted you get by all of his dumb comments. But apparently I banned him. So I apparently clicked the wrong button, and I'm not going to undo it. I was back and forth anyway. Should I ban the guy? He'll just make another account anyway. He does it a million times on every channel. So I'm not worried about it. But that was accidental that I banned him. Anyway.
Yes, I saw it pop up. I was like, that's kind of harsh, but also I'm not going to be too upset about it.
Yeah, no, it was totally unintentional. But I don't think anybody's upset about it. So we'll let him create his next account.
I'm not doing the show if you don't let Brandon back.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll let him back then. On the other side, Tyreek Hill has he clearly is the wide receiver 1 for the Dolphins. Here, let's pull up Dolphin stats on the year, and much better with Tua Tagovailoa. So I sort of in my writing about this, it's sort of a weird breakdown because the team looks so different with Tua versus without Tua. And here, I'll just read off what I wrote. So in 4 games with Tua Tagovailoa, Tyreek Hill has 31 targets on 72.9% route participation, much better than his usage without Tua Tagovailoa. I actually didn't write up the without stats, but much better with Tua Tagovailoa. Was one of the best wide receivers in the NFL last year. I don't know. I think his stats this year don't really do justice to how good we can expect him to be. Let's see. In the flex, we have Tyreek Hill coming in at 26% ownership, so pretty low ownership there. At captain, coming in at 7. Sorry, that's Tua. Never mind. Tyreek Hill coming in at, that can't be right, 4% projected ownership at captain. What are you getting him at, Adam?
Yeah. So this one is there's a huge gap for me between like where I think he should be owned and what I'm getting to. And also I don't know what's going on with his ownership. SaberSim has him projected at 3% captain. You said RG has 4. I don't know if that just has to do with the question marks around his injury, and that'll come up. I have Hill as like by far the most underowned, or one of the most underowned players on the slate. I'm still not getting a ton of him just because I guess he's so expensive. I have like 4% at captain, 14% at flex right now. But I have him with a 33% chance of being optimal at flex, 9% at captain. I mean, it's very, very obvious the upside that he has, and Tua being back does increase the chances of him hitting that. Obviously, playing through an injury is not ideal. And then also the Rams are bottom 10 in man coverage percentage this year. That is something that generally you want to look at for Tyreek Hill. Not that he's ever bad, but he does just torch man coverage, and he is a lot worse against zone. So the Rams, being bottom 10 in man coverage percentage isn't ideal. They are also bottom 10, if I remember correctly, in too high looks, which is nice, but still just a lot of zone coverage overall, which isn't beneficial for Hill. But if the ownership holds how it is, I do think he's going overowned, or underowned rather. Like I said, I'm still not getting a ton of him for whatever reason. I guess just because of how much Achane I'm getting, and then also getting to Puka and Kyren ahead of him. But really weird ownership right now.
It must be that there must be some site that's projecting him out and for zero ownership, and that's just
my guess.
Yeah, so like every site is, or just like has him like doesn't have ownership up, just has zero projections. That brings down the overall. It's got to be something fluky like that, because that's obviously
I haven't seen what site it is. Whatever site it is, it's not one of the ones that I look at, but there has to be something, like you said, just projecting him out, and it's pulling down everybody's ownership algorithm.
Yeah. So if he comes in at like 9% captain ownership, I think I would probably still want more if he's healthy, but I don't know. It'll be, I think that's
9 is the optimal, like the efficient mark for me right now. So I assume he ends up being like 8-9% on.
Yeah, that seems about right. But yeah, he's a strong play, nice enough matchup. Yeah, I'm gonna like Tyreek, but it's obviously all dependent on ownership. So I guess it's sort of hard to talk about. Like it's everything is relative to ownership, and I don't think the ownership right now reflects what we're going to be seeing later. So I'll be doing a show before lock with better numbers probably. Beyond Tyreek, and it's probably going to affect all of them, because that place says Tyreek out probably has a better projection on Jaylen Waddle also, but Jaylen Waddle 6,600. Projected for 5% ownership at captain. He is cheap. He's 6,600, so sub 10,000 even in the captain spot. In the flex, Jaylen Waddle coming in at 27% ownership. Kind of nuts to see. Jaylen Waddle is 6,600, coming in at 27% ownership. Demarcus Robinson, 5,600. I guess he's coming in 14%. I thought it was closer than that, but man, you would not have expected them to be close in price on a showdown slate coming into the year. How much Jaylen Waddle are you getting to? Where are you getting him?
Yeah, I'm getting about 28% at flex. I think you said that's about what RG has him projected
Yep.
for. SaberSim had him projected for about 20%, which I think is a little bit too low, both in terms of the projection and like his optimal rate. But it is a good price tag, and we just haven't really seen much from him this year. Even when Tua's been in, we're not seeing really high target shares for Jaylen Waddle. But at the same time, it's only been 3.5 games, basically 4 games that Tua's played. We know that Waddle's talented. We've seen in the past what he can do, and you are getting a salary discount here relative to his overall talent level. So I'm still happy to get to him at that price tag, even though we haven't really seen very much reason for optimism this season.
Yeah, me too. I think he's still better usage than Mostert, and also like still has that kind of burner speed. I'm distracted again because Brandon Katz immediately comes back. So he is here, and he says he's not creating other accounts. So I don't know how he's back, because it said that he was banned. Maybe I clicked the right button and the messaging is just wrong in StreamYard or something. I don't know what's going on there, but apparently I did just put him in timeout. So I don't know. Okay. Beyond those two, Tyreek and Jaylen Waddle, OBJ, sort of interesting usage recently. We also have River Craycraft likely making his season debut this game. He had been on injured reserve, I believe, and they actually cut a defensive tackle to make room for River Craycraft. So I don't know if that will, if that's an indication that Tyreek is going to be out, or maybe they just want to have an extra backup, or maybe that eats into OBJ. Hard to know exactly what to make of the situation with River Craycraft. But OBJ, not a bad role in recent weeks. Let's see, over the past year, I've already got it pulled up. Over the past 4 games, looks like he has 7 total targets over the past 4 games. So not a great role, running, close to 30% route participation. Looks okay. And he's coming in at 5% ownership in the flex. That seems maybe even a little bit light to me. I don't know. What are you getting to with OBJ?
I'm getting a pretty decent amount here. I have 16% in the flex. 2,400 is a pretty good price tag. He was on the field last week. And even though, again, the Dolphins offense has been really underwhelming this year, in part, obviously, because of Tua's injury, but I still expect them to, with Tua healthy, be a pretty good offense and just have big plays. And so getting the cheap guys that are going to be on the field there is pretty appealing. Had Odell projected for about 12% ownership, 9% chance of being optimal in the flex. So I do think he's going a little bit over-owned, but he's still showing up for me about 16% of the time. Just, pretty nice price tag. Last week ran routes on 30% of dropbacks. That was the most outside of the main pieces. Hill, Achane, Waddle, and Jonnu Smith all ran more routes than Beckham. He ran more routes than everybody else. So that's good to see. You've seen, about 28% in the 2 weeks prior to that, 25% in the week before the bye. So 4 straight games now that he's run between 25 and 30% of routes. He's gotten at least a target in 3 of those 4 games. So just taking some shots on him at 2,400, I think is fine.
Yeah, no, I think it sounds like you're over the. I think I would be too if he comes in at 5%. I guess we'll see if that ends up being the case. Not says Schefter Ritter that Tyreek Hill is a game time decision for the Dolphins against the Rams. He said some things he heard over the weekend sounded promising, and said his guess would be Hill plays. I was reading the Coach Speak Index, and I can't get this off my screen now. There, okay, now it worked. Coach Speak Index was saying that basically, in the past, like with recent injuries in general, Mike McDaniel has been optimistic, spoken optimistically about players, whether they're going to play or not. And that for Tyreek Hill, he has not been saying anything often. He's kind of I don't really know anything. So it was kind of their take was feels like a true game time decision. Anyway, that's
Doesn't Mike McDaniel
we'll know before the game.
Say he doesn't know anything?
He says a lot of stuff, and you can't really, I don't know, it's often up for debate, but he just, according to Coach Speak Index, in recent weeks, he has been more straightforward, yeah, no, I think he's going to play. I'm not worried about it, whatever. And this is not a case as far as injury Coach Speak goes, where he, was said oh yeah, I'm super optimistic about it. It was kind of I don't know, he could play, he could not. I don't know. It was seems more up in the air. But again, we'll know before we have to make lineups, so we don't really need to worry about it right now. But thought that was sort of interesting. Did you say if you're getting into any River Craycraft right now?
I'm not right now.
Some places have him out, so
I don't know if I even had if he was even in when I ran my stuff. I don't think I had him in.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. We'll know before game time if I don't know if he needs to be like called up or what the situation is there, but again, we will know before the game starts. But it sounds like I read something this morning saying that they released Brandon Peely, defensive tackle, to make room for River Crowcraft. So I think he might make a season debut tonight. But it also might be contingent on whether Tyreek Hill plays. So I guess we'll find out later. Okay. Any other wide receivers to talk about? Malik Washington is 2,000. You get into any Malik Washington?
No, I'm not. I think he's in that bucket with guys like Tyler Johnson and Odell, where you're hoping for a big play, but he is running less routes than Odell. He does have the skill set to be a playmaker. If Tyreek Hill gets banged up, you could easily see Washington take on a bigger role as well. If we get the situation where Hill starts the game and gets re-injured somehow. So there is kind of contingent upside there, but I'm not really getting to him.
Yeah, just 4 targets on the season. Hasn't had just 4 routes run, 0 targets last week. Seems like a player you mix in if you're playing like more than 20 lineups. Probably not getting there at all in 20 lineups. All right, on to tight ends. And of course, this is not sure why this is happening today. Refresh. Jonnu projects really well on this slate, so I guess we can start with the Miami side, because Jonnu's role has been really, really strong in recent weeks. And I'll just read off my what I wrote about Jonnu, because I thought it was promising. So over the past 4 games, 27 targets on 62.3% route participation for Jonnu. I didn't break it into Tua versus non-Tua games because I thought it was close enough. Like there wasn't like a huge gap between them. But let me just pull up the game log here for Jonnu Smith, and I guess we should take a look at ownership also. Jonnu coming in at, where are we? In the flex, coming in at 20% projected ownership. In the captain spot, coming in at 3% projected ownership. And again, if you look at the game log here, you can see, the past 2 games. So this is with Tua, 6 targets in each of those. The 2 games prior to that with Snoop Huntley and I don't know who was starting them, but 15 targets over there. So total of 27 targets over the past 4 weeks. Adam, how much interest do you have in Jonnu Smith?
A ton. I mentioned it when we talked about Hill, that I thought Hill and Jonnu were, right now at least with current ownership projections, the 2 most under-owned players on the slate. And I was still having trouble getting to Tyreek just because of the price. Not having trouble at all getting to Jonnu at 4,400. He's in 58% of my lineups in the flex spot. He's showing up a little bit at captain for me as well. But he's running routes at a really, really high rate. 77% route participation last week, 62.5 the week before that, 66 the week before that. In the 4 games that Tua has played, at least a 15.8% target share in 3 of those 4 games, which would actually be the highest target share that Jaylen Waddle has had in any of those games, which is crazy. But he's just been on the field a lot. He's getting targets, and most importantly, the price tag just hasn't really adjusted.
Yeah, looks like he should just be more expensive than he is. 23% total. What do you say the ownership is that you're getting via SaberSim or whatever you're using?
25%.
Okay, so pretty close. So yeah, just not getting quite the ownership that
I have him optimal 36% of the time in flex, 3.5% of the time in captain.
Yeah, so looks like a really, really strong play. Where is going? Oh, I want to see, are there any other? Durham Smythe is 1,000. I think just qualifies as that classic backup tight end who maybe you want to play in a 150 set, but he probably needs to score a touchdown to get there. 1 target. I mean, he maxes out. I guess he had 3 targets in week 1, but just 1 target over the past 2 weeks. Not running a ton of routes. How much interest do you have in Smythe?
Not too much, I don't think. Have him with like a 3% chance of being optimal at captain in the lineups that I would be playing if the slate started right now. He's in 1 of 50, so 2%. So Yeah, he's a 1K guy. Same thing as we said about a lot of other guys.
Yep, classic backup tight end. And then Tanner Connor, I want to just say that I have no interest, but this is another one of those, like, it's always dangerous to just say that. Are you getting to any? I don't remember. Tanner. I don't even know who that is. Tanner Connor, 3 routes run last week.
No, Tanner Hudson paid off for me. I'm cashing out on the Tanners now.
Yeah, no more Tanners. Yeah, I think that makes. Yeah, I guess a couple games with 2 targets in weeks 3 and 4, but probably. I mean, he's certainly a very thin play. Durham Smythe. Let's just look at the ownership on Durham at flex. If I can find it, Durham Smythe coming in 3% ownership of flex. Yeah, that seems about right. Okay. On the other side, so Colby Parkinson has been the lead tight end, but maybe is kind of losing that role to some extent. Last week, just 45.5% route participation. Davis Allen up to 47.7%. And then also in terms of target share, Davis Allen 6.8%. Colby Parkinson 0 targets in that game. It's being projected as though Davis Allen kind of taking on that like split role with Colby Parkinson. Parkinson projecting for just under 5 fantasy points, 11.5% projected ownership. Davis Allen 3.5 points, 16% projected ownership. Are you buying it? Do you think Davis Allen is splitting the work with? And to be clear, I'm not setting you up or anything. I have no idea. Colby Parkinson, Davis Allen. I don't know. We have the 1 game sample where it's looking like maybe they're splitting, and that's how it's being projected. Is this too small of a sample size? Do you think we're adjusting things too much, or do you think this is what we should be doing? How are you playing these guys?
Somewhere in the middle. Like, I don't want to read too much into 1 game where Davis Allen basically split carries with Parkinson. You go back the previous week or routes rather. You go back to previous week, Davis Allen had a 9% route participation to 68% for Parkinson. The week before that, it was 46% Parkinson, 12.5 Allen. So like the assumption here should still be that Parkinson is ahead of Allen, but obviously coming off of last week, there are questions about that. The thing that really stands out to me though is the way ownership is projected right now at their salaries. It's kind of like the field is projected to just kind of throw their arms up and say, like, I don't know. So I'm just not playing any Rams tight ends. And it's creating a situation where right now I'm over the field on both. Like Davis Allen is min salary. He doesn't have to run routes 45% of the time. He just can be on the field a little bit and, catch a ball in the right place and we're good there. So he's in like 16% of my lineups right now, which is above the field, but also Parkinson is pretty cheap, only projected right now for about 13 to 15% ownership. He's in like 25% of my lineups as a value play. It's not that I have confidence in either one or that I have confidence in the ability to guess how their routes are going to be split up or if one or both or neither of them are going to get enough targets to matter. It's more so just that this stands out as a spot where there is uncertainty. And right now the field is being projected to kind of run away from that uncertainty. And I can just kind of grab this spot and say, all right, maybe neither tight end does anything, in which case I just lose out on both fronts. But I can just kind of pretty easily be over the field on both guys, hope that one of them steps up as the top pass catching tight end. And that is a way that I can differentiate by just attacking uncertainty here.
Okay, yeah, that's what I wanted to hear, because that's exactly how I'm feeling. Like, just like maybe just embrace the unknown a little bit here, because like the worst case scenario is they go back to the worst case scenario for Davis Allen is they go back to the roles they had 2 weeks ago, in which case he's slightly overowned as that classic backup tight end who might still score a touchdown.
Yeah.
The best case scenario for Davis Allen is this is a trend in a positive direction. Maybe he has even a bigger role than he had last week. And that, of course, would be the worst case scenario for Colby Parkinson, in which case, yeah, he's too expensive and getting too much ownership if the trend continues. But even if it plateaus where it was last week, his price and ownership are fine for a split tight end.
Yep.
And that's a pretty likely scenario. And then it could just go back to being what it had been previously, in which case he just looks like a smash. So I love the range of outcomes for both. If the field's not going to be on them, I like them both quite a bit. I think like because of the price tag, slight preference for Davis Allen. Like I'll probably have more Davis Allen than Colby Parkinson, but also I think both are just really, really strong plays at ownership.
Yeah. I've been playing Davis Allen this season on Showdown slates when he is the clear
right.
Yeah. Too.
Are you getting to either of them at captain?
I hope not.
Parkinson projected for sub 1%, Davis Allen just over 1% captain ownership.
The only tight end I have a captain at all right now is a Jonnu lineup.
Okay. And then beyond those two, I mean, Hunter Long at one point was looking like maybe he was going to ascend. Let's see. I mean, he got up to 25% route participation in week 7, but then back down to 6%, then back up to 16%. I think he is the classic backup tight end, $600. If he scores a touchdown, you want him. Do you have any disagreement there?
No.
So he's like a mix him into a 150 set, but not interested. I probably wouldn't get there in 20 lineups.
Yeah, I don't have him in 50.
Okay, yeah. Finally, defenses and kickers. I actually haven't looked at the ownership yet on defenses and kickers. Dolphins coming in at about 16% ownership. Kind of like that number. Rams coming in at 15% ownership. Jason Sanders, 17% ownership. Josh McCarty, 19.5% ownership. The kickers seem like fine to me. They've gotten a lot more expensive. The ownership seems about right. I kind of like the defense. I kind of feel like the Dolphins have like a really strong pass defense and they're cheap. So that kind of stands out to me a little bit, not in like a massive way, but I think I'd be overweight. What do you get into with kickers and defenses?
Nothing real. I mean, nothing that like stands out. The field's projected for like 10 to 20% ownership on all of them. I have the field's ownership pretty much being efficient. I have 10 to 15% of all of them. They all just kind of look correctly priced and just like decent plays to me.
Yeah. Okay. So no real strong takes on kickers and defenses, which is generally the case. Like they're so unpredictable. I would say Miami stands out to me just as they're a really, really good pass defense. So they're cheap. So I kind of like that, but it's also a road game for them, which I've started factoring that in a little bit more this year, home versus road games. I don't know that you really should, but kind of feels like for like the defense overall, it kind of seems maybe like it could affect things. Anyway, I think that does it for the play position by position part of the show. Adam, do you have any other thoughts on this? Start with any other thoughts on this slate?
No, I mean, obviously the Tyreek Hill thing is big. I mentioned it earlier, but just a reminder that if Hill is out, you do expect Miami's offensive efficiency in general to drop off. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, no, that is a good note, but we will know prior to the game whether he'll start. So I'll go over whichever side we end up on the evening show. Adam, before I have a show tonight, again, you want to tell people about your NBA show? How long do you think you're going to go with that show? What's the approach going to be there?
Yeah, probably would guess it's like 30 minutes to an hour. Just going to, instead of going game by game, I probably will go game by game, but looking at, how I'm attacking different players in tournaments. And so I'll talk through the games in that lens as opposed to, talking about every single player in every game and dragging it out like a lot of shows do. So going to go that way. Obviously take questions if you have them. I'll mention anything that I see in rotation, stuff like that. But yeah, usually that show takes me 30 minutes to an hour, give or take. So going to do that at 4:30. And then also, I believe for Endgame subscribers, tomorrow we are going to be recording our roundtable, Brick 75, nice. Yuta, Nerdy, and myself. So I believe that's tomorrow. I don't know that we've actually confirmed that, but keep an eye out for that. If you are an Endgame member, if you're not, subscribe now, get your questions in, because we'll be doing that, I think, tomorrow, if not sometime in this week. You are frozen.
No, but I just heard him.
Oh, you might be back. And you're frozen.
You guys hear me?
I can't understand you. I kind of can hear you.
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Adam, can you hear me? Oh shit! Now I see Adam. Yeah, can you hear me, Adam?
I can hear you.
All right. Okay. I for a while could not hear or see you. I don't know what's going on. I got to do something with my internet. Clearly having issues, but
yeah, I can't hear you again.